the revolution actually began before 1776, and we're going to learn about that as well. But before 1776, July 4th, the Declaration of Independence, the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia, after the Revolutionary War that went on for 7.5 years. You might call it a forever war, but it went on for 7.5 years. And then we get the Articles of Confederation. We're going to learn about those. We get the Annapolis meeting, which predates the meeting in Philadelphia on the Constitution. And that didn't work. And we're going to talk about that. Of course, we're going to talk about Philadelphia, what happened there. We're to actually learn about some of the delegates who were there whose names, for some reason, are not historical. And yet they were there. They did important things. And we're going to go over that too. But before we do, I spoke a little bit about John Locke. John Locke, the second treatise on government. Well, two treatises of government. It's been called different things. Here it is. Your framers of the Constitution, but the founders, the revolutionaries, many of them, the leaders, read John Locke. The Enlightenment. The whole notion, remember, I talked about the human individual, the sovereignty of the individual. They get their sovereignty from the sovereignty of God. We're God's creatures. We talked about natural law and natural rights that belong to every human being. Whether they can exercise them or not is a different thing. Whether they can reason them through right reason or not, or they intuit them, that's another thing. But they exist, and they are eternal because they come from God. They come before governments. They come before societies. They come at your birth. That's why the consent of the governed is so important. That's why the whole notion of limited government powers, where does that come from? Remember, prior to the founding of the United States of America and prior to the Enlightenment, you had dictators of one sort or another. Brutal. You had royal families. You had monarchies. Brutal of one kind or another. This whole idea of representative government, consent of the governed, individual free will, individual sovereignty, the sovereignty of a collection of people in a social compact and a civil society, this was unheard of until the Enlightenment. Absolutely unheard of. And where did it all come from in the Enlightenment? John Locke, Montesquieu, and others. Judeo-Christian values and belief systems. That's where it came from. It's like this. And so again, just to recap, that's why Marxism, which rejects all of this, is incompatible with Americanism. That's why Islamism, which is utterly incompatible with all of this, they don't work together. Sharia law is not our law. It's the law, though, of the Islamist. And Sharia law is a pretty brutal law. Sharia law gets involved in every aspect of life, in politics, and so forth and so on. Sharia law doesn't even come from the Quran. It was kind of invented afterwards. But that is the Sharia law that the Islamists, the most radical of the fundamentalists, insist on imposing all the rest of us, as well as the Quran. Okay, but I want to get back to the point. Let's start with something very interesting. You might say, Mark, that goes a little backwards. The Declaration comes before the Constitution, and the whole idea of a revolution comes before actually the Declaration. And yet I want to take you to the Ninth Amendment of the Constitution. Have you ever read the Ninth Amendment of the Constitution? Do you know most judges haven't read the Ninth Amendment of the Constitution? You know it's never cited by the Supreme Court. They just flop it in there because they wanted to put in a number 9 and fill in the blank. It's part of the Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution. I'll have a footnote on this, but it's important. When the Constitution was presented for ratification to the states, there were some serious objections. Serious objections. That's why Hamilton, Madison, John Jay, to a lesser extent, who would become our first Chief Justice of the United States, that's why they wrote the Federalist Papers. They needed to convince the delegates to the state conventions to vote for the Constitution. Now, we're going to get into this more another day, but I'm laying the foundation for today's episode. What happened was, and I went back and read all of the available original documentation from the state conventions. Some of it's better than others. Some of it's almost non-existent. Some of it's voluminous. It just depends. The state conventions, not the state legislatures, not the governors, the state conventions, constitutional conventions. 9 were the most prominent of the 13 in terms of what they wrote. They wrote back about, or wrote up about what they were prepared to do. And even though they ratified the Constitution, some of them had caveats. Some of them said, we have a problem here with this, we have a problem here with that. We've been promised that if the Constitution is ratified by this first Congress that we're creating, that our concerns will be raised in the first Congress, and that there will be an ability to amend this Constitution. That's how you get amendments to the Constitution. It provides, as you know, 2 ways for amendments. 2/3 of both houses of Congress, 3/4 of the state legislatures. Not easy, but still, and of course, Convention of States, the process by which the amendments come, or the proposed amendments from the state legislatures, not even the governor, the state legislatures. Again, that on another day. We can't do it all at once. It's so exciting to me. There's so much to tell you and talk to you about and to share with you. If you saw my library here, I don't have a single library. I have 2 offices. One is loaded with books, ceiling to floor, as much original documentation as I can get. Secondly, as much original commentary as I can get, and then I take it from there. But I also have had to buy different bookcases. The crew here sees it, put them against different walls, and put more books in there, and then books where I broadcast from as well. But to me, it's a great love to learn as much as we can about philosophy, politics, our country. Which gets us to the 9th Amendment of the Constitution. So what happened was the first Congress meets. The Constitution's obviously ratified. They needed 9 out of the 13 states. They got the 9. I think the last one was Rhode Island. And so they get these ratifications, and some of these ratifications come with these statements that there's to be, when the first Congress meets, a consideration of our concerns. So the first Congress meets, and they're meeting, and James Madison is a member of the House of Representatives. He gets elected from Virginia. By the way, you know who he ran against and defeated? The man who would become president later, James Monroe. And so he's in Congress, and he says, hey, fellas, we made a promise to the states. We have to take up this issue of the amendments to the Constitution. So he proposed a committee of the House, that the whole House do this together. That was rejected. So they created a committee, which he ran, and they came up with amendments to the Constitution. They came up with 17 of them. It was sent to the Senate. The Senate whittled it down to 12. The House then accepted the 12, 2/3 of both. And then they sent them to the states. The states adopted 10 of them, the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights. It's quite a significant process, a vetting process. And so it's important to look at what they actually accepted. Here's the 9th Amendment. It says, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Wow. Do you know what that means? That, in my interpretation, is essentially the adoption of the Declaration of Independence and the principles of the Declaration into the Constitution. There have been Supreme Court justices who ignore it, say, well, that's just a statement of fact. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't help us when we're interpreting the Constitution or reaching results or writing our opinions. That's such complete ignorance. The Ninth Amendment is crucially important. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people, you as a sovereign, and the civil society. Folks, if you enjoyed this clip and you want to watch the entire episode, I'm telling you, you're going to love it. You can go to YouTube and subscribe, or go to Rumble and follow. And by the way, tell your friends and family too. I'll see you then.